I used to think the city would save me. I don't know why. Maybe it was something about the way people talked about it, how opportunity pulsed through every alley, how dreams supposedly came alive beneath neon signs and 24-hour diners. But for me, the city was a place where things went to die quietly. Ambition, curiosity, whatever spark I had in my chest when I was younger. It all dimmed slowly, like a shop light someone forgot to replace. Back then, my days felt like a long, unbroken smear. I worked at an auto chain store that smelled like stale rubber and cheap air fresheners, the kind shaped like trees that never reminded you of a real forest. I stood behind a counter lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes, answering the same questions about oil filters and windshield wipers, while trying not to notice how every customer looked exactly like the one before them. Same slumped shoulders, same eyes that slid through you, not at you, like you were a reflection on a dark window. Morning commute, lunch in a corner booth, scrolling through news I didn't care about, commute again. By the time I got home, the building's hallway light always flickered just as I reached it, and I felt like it was mocking me. Some nights, I sat on the couch and stared at my phone until I wasn't sure if the slight vibration I felt was a notification or the phantom buzzing of my own nerves burning out. The worst part wasn't the routine. It was the silence behind it. The kind that settles in your bones, the kind that tells you this is all you'll ever be. I didn't have friends left in the city anymore. They'd all moved on to better things, better lives, or just better ways of pretending they were okay. I didn't blame them. I wasn't exactly someone you built a story around. I was just there, clocking in, clocking out. Some nights I lay awake listening to the hum of traffic outside my window, the horns, the engines, the occasional shout or siren. I used to find comfort in that noise when I first arrived years ago. It meant life was happening, even if it wasn't happening to me. But later, the sounds felt distant, hollow, like echoes of a world I somehow stepped out of without noticing. There were days I didn't recognize myself in the mirror, not in a dramatic existential way, more like the edges of my life had worn down to the point where I couldn't tell where the person I meant to become had gone. My face looked the same, but the expression was blank, as if something had been scooped out behind my eyes. Then came that morning, the one that tipped everything. The shop had just opened, and the air inside was still cold from the night. My manager, a man who spoke only in sighs and passive-aggressive reminders, handed me a work order with a smudge of oil across the top. "Customer wants a tire rotation," he said. "Do it quick, okay?" I took the paper, looked at it, and for some reason, I couldn't make my feet move. It wasn't defiance, not exhaustion, just a sudden, overwhelming sense that I couldn't stay in this place long enough to complete even that small task. My hands started trembling so hard the work order rattled. "I can't do this," I muttered. Not loud, not to him, not even fully to myself, but the words escaped anyway, breaking the thin shell of silence I'd built around my life. I left early that day. My manager texted me question marks. I ignored them. I sat on my apartment floor with my back against the wall, knees drawn up, listening to the refrigerator hum like a slow heartbeat. I don't know how long I stayed there before opening my laptop and searching for jobs outside the city. Anything manual, anything quiet, anything that didn't involve customers staring through me. Scrolling through listings became a strange meditation. Farm work, night shift stocking, seasonal warehouse jobs. Then one stood out. Mechanic needed. Small garage in rural Ohio. Housing on site. Long hours. Simple work. Clean record required. Must follow shop rules. There was something about that last line, "must follow shop rules," that caught me. Not in a foreboding way, more like an invitation, a boundary, a structure, something I could lean against. I clicked the listing. The details were plain, almost suspiciously so. A single photo showed a squat concrete garage surrounded by flat fields and a sky so wide it looked stretched. No filters, no marketing polish, just a place untouched by the noise that was eating me alive. I applied without thinking. I wrote a short message about my experience, attached an outdated resume, and hit send. For the first time in years, my chest felt lighter afterward, as if the simple act of reaching toward something new created space inside me. The response came 3 hours later. We'd like to offer you the position. Come by next Monday. Room's ready. Ask for Harris. That was it. No interview, no follow-up questions. Most people would have been cautious, maybe even suspicious. A job like that offered so quickly, so quietly, it didn't feel entirely normal. But at the time, the abnormal was exactly what I needed. I quit my job the next day, packed the essentials into a single duffel bag, canceled my lease. By Friday, my apartment was almost empty, and for the first time since moving to the city, I could breathe. The night before I left, I stood by my window and looked out at the sprawling grid of lights and traffic below. It didn't feel like I was saying goodbye to anything, more like waking up from a long, restless sleep. As I turned away, the streetlight outside flickered again, just once, quick and sharp, a small final reminder of the life I was abandoning. I didn't look back. What I didn't know then, and maybe could never have known, is that the hollow feeling inside me wasn't an ending. It was a space being cleared. Something else was coming to fill it. Something old, something patient. And in Ohio, it was already waiting. I left before dawn, the sky still the color of lead, heavy and unbroken. The streets were quiet, too quiet for a city that prided itself on never sleeping. Maybe that was just how it felt to me. Like the city had rolled over and decided not to acknowledge my departure. I didn't blame it. I'd been a ghost there for years. My car was old, a 2-door sedan that rattled whenever it idled, but it was mine. I packed the last of my belongings into the back seat, clothes, tools, a few books I kept promising myself I'd read someday. The trunk held a battered toolbox I inherited from my father, though I never used it much. He gave it to me the year before he left, saying something about building a real future. Ironic, considering he disappeared before I ever learned what that meant. I started the engine. The dashboard lights flickered weakly, and then steadied. A thin mist clung to the windshield, catching the glow of the streetlights in a way that made the world outside look distant, like it was already receding. I pulled out of the parking lot and didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not once. The highway out of the city stretched ahead like a clean incision through the landscape. For the first 30 minutes, the skyline hovered in the corner of my vision, a jagged silhouette I'd once mistaken for the shape of opportunity. Then it sank behind a low ridge, swallowed by the horizon. With every mile, I felt lighter. The landscape changed slowly. Concrete softened into patches of pale grass. Then came the long stretches of farmland, the kinds you see in postcards and road trip movies, but never think are real. Barns, silos, vast fields peeled open beneath the sky like pages of a book written in an older language. I rolled the window down. The air that rushed in was cold and sharp, smelling faintly of soil and something metallic underneath. It wasn't quite fresh, but it wasn't city air either. It felt honest, raw, freedom, even if temporary. Somewhere around the state line, my GPS lost signal. The screen froze, then blinked to black. I tapped it. Nothing. I wasn't concerned. The directions Harris sent were simple. Take Route 36 until you see mile marker 174. Turn left onto Old Orchard Road. Follow until the pavement ends. Straightforward enough. The sun broke through the clouds sometime after, washing everything in a muted gold that made the world look softer, almost fragile. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the open window frame. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about anything. Not the past, not the future, just the next stretch of road. Around noon, I stopped at a rest area. It was one of those small, outdated ones. 2 vending machines, a single picnic table, a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 1980s. A large map of the county was mounted to a wooden board, but most of the paint was peeling. Someone had scratched deep grooves into the plastic cover over the route numbers, forming a shape that looked almost like a handprint. 5 long, uneven marks dragged downward. I stared at it for a moment, feeling a small, involuntary chill. It wasn't the mark itself that unsettled me. It was how deliberate it looked, like whoever made it wanted others to notice, to wonder. But I shook the feeling off. It was probably just vandalism, some bored kid with a knife or a key. Nothing worth dwelling on. Back on the highway, the traffic thinned until I seemed to be the only one traveling any direction. The loneliness wasn't oppressive, though. It was clean. A silence that felt like it was giving me space instead of taking it away. When I reached Route 36, the road narrowed and dipped between rolling hills. The trees grew denser, taller, leaning over the pavement as if listening. A few had thick trunks split down the middle, exposing pale inner wood in jagged patterns. Storm damage, I told myself. Nothing mystical about trees cracking in half during rough weather. Still, I kept both hands on the wheel. Around 3 in the afternoon, I finally saw mile marker 174, a rusted sign half buried in weeds. Old Orchard Road looked less like a road and more like a scar cut into the earth, paved once, long ago, and then mostly forgotten. The deeper I drove, the quieter the world became. Birds disappeared. Even the wind felt muted. The fields were barren, stripped down to jagged stubble, and the ground looked darker than soil should, almost black, like it had been burned or soaked through with oil. My car jostled over a pothole, then another. The road was deteriorating fast, turning from asphalt to cracked concrete to gravel that popped beneath the tires. Finally, the pavement ended. Ahead of me, maybe 200 yards down a dirt path, sat the garage. It wasn't quite like the photo. The real thing looked older, heavier, like it had been anchored into the earth rather than built on it. A squat concrete building with rust creeping over its metal siding. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, as if tired of holding its own weight. A sign out front hung crooked. Harris Auto Service. The paint had flaked off so badly the letters were barely readable. Beside the garage stood a small single-story structure. My new housing. It reminded me of a hunting cabin that had lost the will to pretend it was anything else. Something about the place made the hair on my arms rise. Not fear. Not yet. More like recognition, an instinctual awareness that I'd crossed some invisible threshold. Before I could linger on that thought, the main garage door rolled up with a groaning metallic clatter. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard gone silver in uneven streaks. His clothes were dark with grease, but his stance was steady, deliberate, like someone who had spent most of his life around heavy machinery and learned to respect what they could do. He raised a hand in greeting. "You must be the new guy," he called out. "I'm Harris." I stepped out of the car, feeling the wind push lightly against my back, urging me forward. "This place'll be good for you," he said, almost as if reading my thoughts. "But you need to learn how things work here." He paused. "And you need to learn the rules." He didn't smile when he said it. The way he looked at me made it clear. These weren't the kind of rules you could afford to break. I remember the moment I stepped fully onto the gravel outside the garage. The stones gave under my boots with a brittle crunch like old bones. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint smell of motor oil, rusted metal, and something else beneath it, something earthy, wet, familiar, but wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. The scent lingered at the edge of my awareness, close enough to notice, but too slippery to identify. Harris's gaze followed me as I walked toward him, steady and unblinking. Not unfriendly, but assessing, as though he were trying to determine what parts of me were solid and what parts were still drifting in whatever hollow space I'd come from. "You made good time," he said. His voice was low, scratchy like gravel grinding beneath a tire. "Most folks get lost before they reach the turnoff." "I almost did," I admitted. "GPS cut out." He grunted. "Happens. Technology doesn't like it out here. Your signals get confused." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. Something about the way he said confused made me feel like the explanation would be worse than the uncertainty. He gestured toward the garage. "Come on, I'll show you around." The interior was dim, even with the overhead fluorescents on. Only 3 of the fixtures seemed to work, casting uneven patches of light across the concrete floor. Tools hung neatly on the far wall, far too neatly. Each wrench, each ratchet, each screwdriver was placed with mathematical precision. Even the stains on the floor looked deliberate. There were 4 service bays, 3 were empty. The 4th held a pickup with its hood raised. The truck was old, 60s, maybe 70s, its paint eaten away by time. But the engine was pristine, almost reverently clean, like someone had poured hours of care into keeping it alive. "That one's a long-term resident," Harris said, nodding at it. "We don't rush her." I didn't know why, but the word "her" made something in me tighten. He talked like the truck wasn't just a machine, but a thing that breathed, slept, waited. "Your room's back there." He pointed to a door in the corner that led to a small hallway. "Bathrooms shared. Hot water works if you don't push your luck with it." I nodded. "Got it." He crossed his arms. "You ready to start tomorrow?" "I came to work," I told him. Not much else waiting for me anywhere. He studied me for a moment, then gave a single slow nod. "Good. Then I'll give you the most important thing first." He stepped closer. The air between us felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. "There are rules in this shop," he said quietly. "Not the normal kind, the ones that keep us alive out here." A strange shiver crawled up my spine. The wind outside shifted again, brushing against the metal walls and making them creak softly. "What kind of rules?" I asked. "You'll learn them," he said. "One at a time. You don't need them all yet." He reached up and pulled a chain hanging from the ceiling. The largest overhead door closed slowly, rattling as it descended. The sound echoed through the garage like distant thunder. "Tonight," he continued, "you rest. Tomorrow, you work. After that, you listen." "Listen to what?" I wanted to ask, but Harris had already turned away. He led me back outside toward the small housing unit. The sun was dipping behind the horizon now, past staining the fields in muted gold and blood-orange lines. The garage cast a long, warped shadow across the ground, and for a split second, I thought I saw that shadow twitch, like something moved beneath it, something vast, slow, patient. But when I blinked, it was gone. "Things get quieter after dark," Harris said casually as he unlocked the cabin door. "If you hear anything you think you shouldn't, don't step outside, even if it sounds familiar." A cold ripple spread through my chest. Why would something sound familiar? He didn't answer. He just pushed the door open and handed me a key. The cabin was sparse. A bed, a dresser, a small desk, an overhead light that flickered once before stabilizing. The walls smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Harris stood in the doorway. "You'll hear things eventually. Everybody does." I swallowed. "And I shouldn't go outside when I do?" He held my gaze for a long moment before saying, "Not unless you want to meet what's making the noise." The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone in the dim room. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed, listening. Outside, the wind had quieted, too quiet. Rural areas were supposed to have nighttime sounds. Insects, distant barking, the faint hum of life settling into darkness. But here the silence felt intentional, like everything was holding its breath. My phone had no signal, not even a faint bar, just no service staring back at me. I turned it off and lay back on the thin mattress. For a while, I stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks with my eyes. My thoughts drifted back to the city, back to the suffocating emptiness I'd left behind. This place was quiet, yes, but the silence was different. Not hollow, not apathetic, more like an invitation. An invitation from something watching the edge of the light. Sometime around midnight, just as I started to fall asleep, I heard it, a sound, soft, slow, like something dragging across gravel just outside my window. The rhythm was uneven, too heavy to be an animal, too deliberate to be the wind. I held my breath, the dragging stopped, and then in the stillness, I heard a voice, faint, whisper, thin, speaking my name. "Hey, you." My blood turned to ice. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Harris's warning pulsed through my mind like a heartbeat. "If you hear anything you think you shouldn't, don't step outside." The whisper came again, closer, almost pressed against the wall. "Come out here. I need help." It sounded like me. My own voice, impossibly distorted, stretched thin, but unmistakably mine. My hands shook so violently I had to clench them into fists. The whisper stopped. The gravel outside shifted as if something heavy had turned away. Then silence returned, deep and complete. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and somewhere beyond the walls of my room, buried in the vast Ohio dark, something moved, as if pleased I'd listened. I barely felt the morning when it came. Sleep had been a thin, fragile thing, breaking every time I drifted near it. By the time a muted gray light seeped into the cabin, my eyes were already open, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the certainty that whatever wandered the gravel last night had truly left. Harris didn't knock. He just shouted through the door. "Breakfast in the shop. Don't be slow." His voice was flat, unbothered, and as if the night was just another moving part in the machine of this place. I got dressed, splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom sink, and stepped outside. The morning air was too still, like the world was in the middle of inhaling and refused to let go. The gravel path showed no signs of disturbance, no tracks, no drag marks, no footprints, human or otherwise. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the entire thing. But the memory of that voice, my voice, still crawled beneath my skin. The garage door was open, and I walked into the smell of metal and warm coffee. Harris sat on a folding chair beside a cluttered workbench. A thermos and 2 mismatched mugs lay between us. "Rough night?" he asked without looking up. I paused. "You heard something?" "I hear everything." He pushed a mug toward me. "You'll get used to it, or you won't. Either way, you follow the rules." I sat across from him. The coffee tasted bitter and burnt, but it was grounding in a way I desperately needed. "You said there were rules," I said quietly. "Last night, you stayed put. Good. That's rule 1. He lifted his mug slightly as if in a makeshift toast. "Rule 1, never answer what calls you after dark. Doesn't matter what it sounds like." My heart gave a slow, uneasy thud. "Then what was it?" "Nothing you want to meet." He said it like he was describing a bad storm or a broken fuel pump. Not a monster, not a thing with intent. It tries things sometimes, voices it thinks you trust, especially new people. I swallowed, so it knew I was here. "Oh, it always knows," he said. "It's older than this place, older than Ohio. You're just new blood." The words hung between us, thick and loaded. He stood abruptly. "Come on, time to work." He walked into the nearest service bay and tossed me a pair of black gloves. They were thick, rubber-coated on the palms, worn but sturdy. "You ever do real mechanic work?" he asked, "or just change your own oil?" I caught the gloves and forced my mind away from the night's unease. Mostly easy stuff. Bit of brakes, bit of hoses, nothing major. "Good." He clapped once, loud enough to echo. "Means you ain't learned bad habits yet. I'll teach you the way things need to be done here." The first hour was ordinary, almost disappointingly so. Basic work, simple tools, the rhythm of bolts and sockets. I fell into the routine faster than I expected. The repetitive motion soothing my mind, wrapping it in something predictable, something human. We replaced a serpentine belt on an old Ford, then changed out brake pads on a Civic that looked like it had survived 3 lifetimes too many. My hands grew warm from exertion, my muscles loosening in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You work clean," Harris muttered approvingly. "Most new guys throw tools around like they're dispensable. Can't do that here." "Why's that?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a long metal wrench, the kind made for torque, heavy and cold, smooth from decades of careful use. He held it up between us. "You see this wrench?" he asked. I nodded. "This one's been here longer than I have, longer than the previous guy too. Everything in this garage has a play, some of it because it's practical." He paused. "Some of it because it's safer." The air thickened again, the way it did last night when something dragged itself across the gravel. "Safer how?" I asked. "Because things pay attention," he said simply, "and they don't like change." A chill climbed the length of my spine. Before I could ask more, the phone on the wall rang, a landline, old, beige, the coiled cord yellowing and stiff. Harris grabbed it. "Yeah." A pause. "We can take it." Another pause. "Tell him to drop it at the edge. I'll fetch it." He hung up and wiped his hands on a rag. "Customer?" I asked. "Something like that." He nodded toward the road. Car coming in, but not here. He knows better. Knows better than what? Harris took a deep breath, then said, Rule 2, no outsider steps onto this property unless I say so. I frowned. Why? He stared at me with an expression I couldn't read, part warning, part resignation. Because it notices newcomers, he said softly. It watches anyone who isn't from here. And if a stranger walks onto this land, his jaw tightened, sometimes it follows them home. The silence after that was long and heavy. Finally, he grabbed his keys. You stay in the garage. Don't step outside the threshold while I'm gone. You think I'm in danger? I asked. Not today. He paused at the door. But the rules exist for a reason. I watched him leave, stepping into the sunlight as the gravel crunched beneath his boots. The moment he crossed beyond the garage's shadow, something strange happened. The air inside felt colder, as if his presence had been keeping something at bay. I leaned against the workbench, waiting, listening. Minutes crawled. The quiet deepened. Then, a thump inside the garage, behind me. A slow, deliberate thump, like something heavy shifting its weight beneath the concrete floor. My breath froze. Another thump, closer, a vibration passed up through my boots. I stared at the cracked surface of the shop's foundation, and beneath it, I swear I heard a sound, a low, wet, rhythmic noise. Breathing. Something massive, patient, alive, breathing under the garage. The first instinct I had was the same primitive one that must have kept whatever early humans existed alive long enough to make more of themselves. Don't move. I stayed rooted to the concrete, every muscle drawn tight, breath small and shallow. The garage felt colder with each second, the light from outside paling as if the sun itself had stepped back. The thing beneath the floor exhaled again. A thick, syrupy of air pushing past something wet. I could feel it travel up through the soles of my boots, into my legs, up my spine, like it was smelling me through the concrete, learning the weight of me, the shape of me. Another thump. This time, the crack in the foundation shifted. Just barely, but enough for dust to break loose and drift upward in a tiny trembling cloud. I didn't blink. I didn't dare. Harris had told me Rule 1, and I had followed it. But this wasn't calling me. This wasn't trickery. This was something different, something curious. I forced my voice into a thin, barely audible whisper. Please don't come up. Not now. Somehow, impossibly, the breathing slowed. Not quieter, just slower. More measured, like it was listening or waiting. I backed up a single inch, the heel of my boot brushing against the metal leg of the rolling stool behind me. The floor responded instantly. A hard, sharp thump, so powerful it rattled the tools hanging on the pegboard. It knew I moved. It didn't want me to. The wrench cabinet beside me buzzed like something inside was shaking against the metal. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, then steadied, though the air now hummed with a strange pressure, making my ears ache. The creature beneath the garage inhaled again, but now there was a different quality to it, something expectant, something aware. My throat tightened. And then, from the open doorway, gravel crunched. Harris was back. The breathing stopped instantly, not faded, not withdrew, stopped, like someone had cut the sound with a blade. For several long heartbeats, the garage was perfect, suffocating silence. Then Harris's silhouette filled the doorway. He stepped inside, carrying a cardboard box under one arm, a flat tire under the other. You look like you saw a ghost, he said. I pointed at the floor, trying to speak, to warn him, to tell him that something enormous lived under his garage and had been testing the surface like a hand pressing against thin ice. But Harris didn't let me. He slammed the door shut behind him and locked it. Then he whispered, without turning around, You didn't move, did you? I only backed up a little. I didn't. He closed his eyes, jaw tightening. Damn it. He set the box down carefully, like any loud motion might provoke something. Sit down, he ordered. Now. I sat on the nearest stool, legs weak, hands shaking. Harris walked to the center of the garage, directly over the crack, and knelt. He pressed his palm flat to the concrete. A slow exhale left him. Not fear, not relief. Something like respect. It's awake, he murmured. My stomach twisted. It was breathing. I know. It hit the floor. I felt it. What is it, Harris? He stood, brushing off his hands as though touching the concrete left a residue. His eyes met mine, and for the first time since I arrived here, I saw something like genuine fear behind them. Or maybe not fear, recognition. You remember Rule 1, he said quietly, but this is Rule 3. Rule 3? His voice dropped to a low, warning growl. Rule 3, never stand directly over the cracks when you're alone. I swallowed. My tongue felt thick, useless. Why? Because it's not buried, he nodded toward the foundation. It's just under us. The words didn't make sense, not in any logical way. You mean like a cave system? He gave a humorless laugh. This place doesn't sit on any caves. Then what the hell is it? A neighbor, he said softly. One that's been here longer than the roads, longer than the town, longer than anything with a name. A neighbor. God, the way he said it made my skin crawl. And it just lives under your garage? It lives under all of this. He gestured to the land, the trees, the horizon. The garage is just where the ground is thin enough for us to hear each other. Us, each other, as if we and it shared something. I felt goosebumps rise across my arms. And it knew I moved, I whispered. It always knows movement. Harris leaned against the workbench. But it wasn't angry. How do you know? Because you're still breathing. Silence settled between us. It felt heavier now, like something listening from beneath the foundation had leaned in closer. Harris picked up a wrench and began cleaning it absently with a rag, though his eyes stayed on the crack. You'll learn more, he said, but not today. You've already gotten a lot more attention than you should on your first week. My first week? I echoed quietly. He nodded. This thing, does it want something from me? Everything wants something, Harris murmured. Even the old ones, especially them. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure there was a right response. Harris stepped forward, clapped a hand on my shoulder, grounding me with a sudden, almost fatherly firmness. You did good, kid, he said. You stayed mostly still, didn't scream, didn't run. You respected the space. That matters. He looked toward the locked garage door. But from now on, you don't answer voices after dark, and you never walk across the cracks unless I'm with you. I nodded, throat dry. Good, he said, releasing my shoulder. Now grab the jack. We've got a tire to swap. I stared at him. We're just going back to work? That's the rule, he smiled weakly. Routine keeps us safe. But as I reached for the jack, I felt it again. Just a faint tremor. A subtle shift in the concrete beneath my feet, like something below was adjusting itself, settling, learning the weight of me, remembering me. The garage hummed with quiet pressure, and somewhere beneath the foundation, it breathed again. If routine was supposed to keep me safe, then it was a brittle, fragile shield. Because even as I forced myself back into the rhythm of the work, tightening bolts and checking tread, my mind kept drifting to the floor beneath us. To the thing breathing through the concrete. Every vibration, every subtle tremor, every metallic click in the shop sounded amplified, as though the creature below had tuned itself to me, memorizing each tiny sound I made. Harris worked like nothing had changed. He whistled under his breath as he lifted the flat tire onto the machine, the rhythmic whine of the bead breaker cutting through the tension. You'll get used to it, he said casually, though I hadn't said a word. You really think that? I asked. He shrugged. You get used to anything, given enough time. The human brain's built that way. It adapts. To the thing under us, I said. To whatever life asks of you. He shot me a sideways glance. This place just asks a bit differently. I didn't argue, mostly because I couldn't. My thoughts were too tangled, too raw. I kept replaying the moment it hit the floor, the sound sharp enough to vibrate in my teeth, and the worst part was that dim, unmistakable sense of awareness. It knew where I stood. It felt my movements. It chose to stop when Harris returned, as if it recognized him, or respected him. I swallowed hard and focused on tightening the lug nuts with the torque wrench. The steady clicks were comforting, normal, human sounds. Things I understood. But the feeling of being watched from beneath never left. We finished the tire in silence, and Harris washed his hands at the deep metal sink bolted to the wall. The water sputtered, then turned brown for a moment before clearing. "Well, that's done," he said. "I'll go drop the tire back where it's supposed to go." He headed to the garage door, unlocked it, and stepped outside. Before following, he paused and looked back at me. "Stay behind the threshold," I nodded. He disappeared into the sunlight, walking toward the road with the tire tucked under one arm. The gravel crunched in an easy rhythm beneath his boots. I stood there, just inside the doorway like he asked, staring out at the quiet road that cut between the trees. After a minute or two, a shape appeared at the far edge, a tall man in a windbreaker, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His car wasn't visible. He must have parked further up, hidden behind the bend. His posture was tense, shoulders stiff, chin tilted downward. I could feel his discomfort from here. Outsider. The thought came unwanted in Harris's voice. The man nodded when Harris approached him. They talked for a moment, too quiet for me to hear. Harris handed him the tire. The man slipped him a folded bill or two, a normal exchange, almost, because as soon as the man touched the rubber, his head jerked subtly to the side. Not at Harris. Not at me, but toward the garage, as though he felt something, as though something unseen had brushed past him. The man blinked, stepped back, clutching the tire tighter. Then he said something I couldn't make out, but I saw Harris shake his head and gesture firmly toward the road, as if sending him away. The man hesitated, looked again toward the garage, then nodded, hurried to his car, and drove off with a panicked squeal of tires. Harris watched his taillights vanish. Then he turned back toward me. His face was pale. He walked quickly, too quickly, back to the garage. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, he shut the door. He didn't lock it this time. He just stood there, breathing hard. I raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" Harris didn't answer for several seconds. Finally, he said, "Did you feel it?" I blinked. "Feel what?" His jaw tightened. "The pull." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "What pull?" He motioned me aside, stepped to the doorway, and pressed a hand against the wood frame, almost like he was checking if it was warm. "It reached out," he said quietly, "toward him." My stomach tightened. "The outsider?" "Yes, but he didn't step onto the property," I said. "That doesn't matter." Harris's eyes flicked downward to the foundation, as if the creature were just inches below. Sometimes it tries anyway, when it's hungry. I felt the blood drain from my face. Hungry for what? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked deeper into the garage, stopping directly above the largest crack in the concrete. He crouched and touched the surface again, gently, like one might touch the back of a sleeping animal. He whispered something under his breath, something I didn't understand. Then he stood and walked past me toward the office, motioning for me to follow. Inside the cramped office, lined with yellowed calendars, dusty filing cabinets, and a single humming fluorescent light, he shut the door. "Sit," he said. I sat. He lowered himself heavily into the chair across from me, tapping a cigarette out of a half-crushed pack, but not lighting it, just rolling it between his fingers. "I need you to understand something," he said, "and I need you to take it seriously." I nodded, throat dry. "When an outsider steps onto the land," he continued, "it sees them differently. They're brighter in a way, easier to pull at, easier to tempt." "Tempt how?" I whispered. "By calling." Harris's eyes flickered. "By making them curious, by making them walk where they shouldn't." I felt a shiver creep down my spine, remembering the man's jerking head, that instinctive flinch. "So why didn't it pull him all the way?" I asked. Harris looked away. "That was me," he said quietly. I told it no. A cold realization settled over me. "You talked to it?" I breathed. He didn't flinch. "I keep it calm." "How long have you been doing that?" Harris exhaled, and something old and tired passed through his face. "Since before I took over the shop, since my father died," he paused, "and his father before him." The office felt suddenly smaller. "What is it to you?" I asked. He finally lit the cigarette, took a long drag, then said, "It's our responsibility." "Responsibility?" I echoed. "To a monster living under the ground?" Harris shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. To this town, to the people, to keep them safe from what sleeps here, and to keep what sleeps here from ever waking all the way. My heart hammered. And what happens if it does? I asked. Harris didn't answer at first, but when he did, his voice was barely more than a breath. Then, nobody in Ohio will ever see daylight again. Outside the office, through the thin walls of the garage, the floor trembled. Just once. A reminder, a heartbeat, a promise. The thing beneath us was listening. The tremor faded, but it left something behind. An ache in the air, a pressure behind my ears like a half-remembered scream. Harris didn't move. He sat with his elbows on the desk, cigarette trembling faintly between two fingers. "You hear that?" he asked. I nodded. "That wasn't it waking," he said. "That was it agreeing." "To what?" I whispered. "To keep sleeping, for now." He tapped ash into a chipped mug filled with old bolts. The sound was soft, almost delicate, but it made my nerves twitch. "Come on," he said, standing. "I need to show you something." My legs felt weak, but I followed him out of the office. The air in the garage felt thicker, as if we were walking through invisible cobwebs. The foundation crack that had thrummed earlier now lay still and silent, like a scar cooling after fever. Harris walked past it without looking down. He headed toward the far bay, the one he hadn't opened since I'd arrived. Its sliding door was older than the others, darkened from decades of use. The padlock was thick, iron, and cold-looking. He dug a key out of his pocket. "This is Rule 3, he said. "You don't open this bay. Ever. Not without me." "What's inside?" I asked. He rested his palm on the cold metal. "The reason we're still alive." The lock clicked open. My heartbeat surged. "Wait," I started. "I thought..." "I'm opening it now," he cut in, "because you need context. The thing underground isn't the only danger here. It isn't even the oldest." That didn't help my pulse. The door rolled upward with a groaning metallic whine, the sound echoing through the entire garage like something awakening reluctantly. Dust drifted from the track. I stepped behind Harris instinctively. Inside the bay, the air was colder, much colder. My breath fogged faintly even though it wasn't winter. At first, I couldn't see anything except a large tarp draped over something shaped like a car, a very old, very heavy car. The tarp's edges fluttered slightly, though there was no breeze. Then my eyes adjusted. The walls of this bay were covered in carved symbols, not painted, not drawn, carved. Deep gouges cut into the concrete, spiraling like ancient script. Some lines were straight and methodical, others jagged, frantic, as if scratched by a hand shaking with terror. Hundreds, maybe thousands of these marks filled the walls from floor to ceiling. "What the hell?" I murmured. Harris didn't step inside. He held the door halfway, one hand on the metal like he was keeping it steady. "Every mechanic who's worked here left their mark," he said. "All the way back to the first one." I approached the wall slowly. The carvings seemed to shift under the low light, forming patterns that made my stomach twist. "Why?" I asked. "To record what it tells us." Harris said quietly. I froze. What tells you?" He nodded toward the ground. "Sometimes it speaks through the floor." The cold deepened in my chest. "It speaks?" I whispered. "Not in words. Not exactly." He stepped aside so I could see the largest symbol, carved in thick, looping strokes like someone had dug into the concrete with a crowbar. It was fresh, the edges newer, lighter. "I carved that one last week." The curved lines intersected in a way that made my head ache if I looked directly. "What does it mean?" I murmured. Harris hesitated. "It's warning us about pressure building, about hunger." My stomach twisted again. "You can understand it?" I asked. "Only enough to keep it quiet, enough to negotiate." I staggered back a step. "Negotiate? With that thing?" He finally looked at me fully, eyes hollow but determined. "You think I like this?" His voice cracked for the first time. "You think this is the life I wanted? My father tried to run from it. My grandfather tried to ignore it. It killed both of them." Silence swallowed the garage. I stared at the carvings, trying to imagine generations of men, hands shaking, knuckles bleeding, scratching warnings into the concrete. The weight of legacy. The burden passed down like a cursed tool. "What happens," I asked softly, "if you stop carving?" His answer was immediate. "It gets restless. And if you stop listening, His jaw tightened. It stopped sleeping. A slow, heavy dread settled into me, rooting deep. I looked at the tarp-covered object again. Up close, I could see the shape more clearly, boxy, old-fashioned. A truck, maybe, or a hearse. Metal edges poked through the tarp like bones beneath thin skin. "What's under the tarp?" I asked. Harris didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was a whisper. "That belonged to the first mechanic, the one who built this place. It's older than the town, older than the road. Some people think that's where the thing first crawled out." I swallowed. Hard. "Is it dangerous?" I asked. "Everything in this bay is dangerous," he said. "That's why it stays sealed." Yet he left it open now. A deliberate choice. "Why are you showing me this?" I whispered. "Because you heard it." His eyes locked onto mine. "And once you hear it, really hear it, you're part of this place whether you want to be or not." The cold clenched around my ribs. "So I'm trapped?" I asked. "No." He shook his head. "You're responsible." The tremor that rippled through the floor was softer this time, but unmistakable. A reply. A breath. A presence. I turned toward the symbols again, and for the briefest moment I thought I saw one of them shift, like the concrete itself had flexed, breathing in time with the creature underground. Harris heard it too. He lowered the bay door slowly, reverently, as if tucking a child into bed. When it shut with a metallic finality, the temperature immediately warmed by a few degrees. "You'll carve your first mark tonight," he said. Fear pulsed in my throat. "What if I don't?" He didn't blink. "Then something else will carve it for you." Outside, a crow screamed, long, ragged, too human in its cry, and beneath our feet, the floor answered. The first chunk of concrete snapped upward like a manhole cover flung from below. Dust billowed across the floor, coating the air in a powdery haze that scratched at the back of my throat. Something wet struck the inside of the garage behind me, like a raw steak slapped onto tile. I didn't turn, not yet. My hands fumbled along the doorframe, searching desperately for some latch, some switch, some stupid mechanical flaw I could exploit. The metal was cold enough to sting my palms. I yanked the handle again, locked, still locked. Behind me, something unfolded. I don't mean stood up, I mean unfolded. Like a creature packed into too small a space was stretching into the shape it preferred. The air behind me bent inward, pulling a draft that tugged at my clothes. The hairs on my arms stood straight up. The thing inhaled, a long, thick, dragging breath that sounded like it filtered through layers of wet cloth and bone. I forced myself to look, just a glance. Just enough to know which way to run, if running was even an option. What rose from the cracked foundation wasn't a body, not a whole one. It was pieces, fragmented shapes of joints and limbs that didn't connect where they should, like anatomy sketches someone had ripped apart and rearranged without looking. A half-torso dragged itself upward by an arm that wasn't an arm but a series of hooked segments, like the legs of a centipede fused into one appendage. But worst of all, it had a face. A face I recognized, not because it looked like a person, but because it looked like many. Features layered over features, a dozen expressions flickering through a single, melting geometry. A brow I'd seen on a customer last week, a jawline that reminded me of my mother. Lips that moved like they were trying to form a word they'd once known how to pronounce, and when they spoke, every mouth moved. Stay. My knees nearly buckled. Something slammed against the door from the other side. From outside, the force rattled the hinges. "Kid, open the damn door." Jerry, his voice was unmistakable, sharp, irritated, alive. I slapped the lock open just as the creature lurched toward me, dragging half its mass across the concrete with a scraping noise so low it made the tools on the wall vibrate. The door flew inward and Jerry grabbed me by the collar, yanking me out into the sunlight like I weighed nothing. Behind us, the creature reared back from the threshold as if the daylight burned it. Its many faces writhed at once, an expression of hatred, fear, hunger, before sinking back beneath the cracked floorboards. The slabs snapped shut. Hard. Dust burst outward in a final coughing cloud. Jerry slammed the door behind us, panting. "Jesus Christ, kid," he muttered, pushing his hat back. "How much did you see?" I wasn't breathing right. My chest kept hitching like my lungs weren't sure if they wanted air or to scream. There were voices, I whispered. Under the floor. Something was, it said. Jerry held up a hand. Don't repeat anything it told you. The look in his eyes, this wasn't surprise. This wasn't denial. This was a man who'd been expecting this, maybe for a while. He motioned me toward the gravel lot, away from the garage. I followed, legs shaking. Once we were far enough, he turned to me, jaw clenched. That thing, those things, they've been under this shop longer than the concrete has, longer than the road, longer than this damn town. My pulse pounded so hard I felt it behind my eyes. You hear 'em, you walk away, he continued. You feel 'em, you walk faster. And if the floor ever cracks, he stared at me, expression flattening into something grave. You don't look down. My mind reeled. Why didn't you tell me? Jerry took a long breath. It came out shaky. Because once you hear them, they hear you back. And once they know your voice, he shook his head. It's harder for them to forget. I swallowed hard. My tongue tasted like metal. My voice barely came out. What do they want? Jerry looked toward the garage door where the last curls of dust settled in the sunlight. They want you to open the floor. He met my eyes again. And they don't care how they convince you. Say, continue, and we descend deeper into the rules Jerry has been keeping from you, and into what's really beneath the garage. Jerry didn't take me back to the garage. He didn't even walk me near it. He kept moving across the gravel lot with long, purposeful strides, jaw locked tight. I followed because my legs didn't know what else to do. My body was still running on the last trace of panic, like a car coasting on fumes after the engine died. We stopped only once we reached the far edge of the property, near a tall chain-link fence covered in rust and wild vines. The sunlight here felt different, sharper. Like the air itself was relieved to be away from that building. Jerry lit a cigarette. He didn't offer me one. He didn't even look at me. He just breathed smoke and gravel dust, staring at the horizon like it held answers he didn't want to say out loud. Finally, he spoke. You shouldn't have heard it breathe. The sentence felt like a verdict. I didn't mean to, I said. My voice came out hoarse. Jerry, it was under the floor. What the hell is this place? He didn't answer. Not yet. He knelt, picked up a small stone, rolled it around his fingers, then flicked it into the trees. I told you the rules, he said slowly, but I didn't tell you why they exist. Because once someone knows the why, they start to think they can negotiate with the rules, bend them, test the edges. He pointed back toward the garage. That thing under there? It loves people who test things. My stomach twisted. So what is it? I pushed. Some creature? Some, anomaly? Is it just one? Jerry gave a humorless laugh. One? He rubbed his temples. Kid, that voice you heard last night? That wasn't the same one that clawed at the foundation today. And that one wasn't the same thing you'll hear on the roof tonight. And the one that might call your name from the tree line tomorrow? He tossed his spent cigarette, crushing it under his boot. They're all different. They just pretend to be the same. The air thinned around us. Is this supernatural? I asked. Jerry's eyes narrowed. Listen to me carefully. Very carefully. Nothing here is supernatural. He stepped closer, voice dropping into a low, heavy rumble. But some things are older than nature, older than whatever word you're looking for. They were here before the ground froze, before humans crawled out of wherever the hell we crawled from. This shop, this land, is sitting on top of something that remembers a world without us. He paused. And it doesn't like being forgotten. A chill slid down my spine. Jerry glanced at the garage again, just a flicker of his eyes, but something in that gesture made me follow his gaze. The cracked floor was hidden now, the concrete still and innocent under the late morning sun. But I couldn't unsee what clawed its way out of it. I couldn't unhear the way all its mouths whispered the same word. Jerry, I said quietly. It said, stay. Why? This time he looked at me fully, not with irritation, not with frustration, but with something close to regret. It likes new blood, he said. New voices, new shapes. You're interesting to it. More interesting than I've been in a long time. He dug into his jacket and pulled out a key ring, an old one, brass and worn. He held it out. "For what?" I asked. "For the cabin," he said. "You sleep early today. You keep the lights on. And no matter what you hear, no matter what knocks, calls, or tries to crawl through, you do not open that damn door again. Not until I fetch you in the morning." "I'm not a kid," I muttered. Jerry's stare sharpened. "That's exactly what it wants you to think." A gust of wind swept through the lot, carrying a low echo with it, like something brushing beneath the earth. The sound vibrated the fence behind us, rattling the rusty links. Jerry didn't flinch. "Go," he said. "What about you?" He turned, started walking back toward the garage, shoulders heavy. "I have to fix the crack." I felt my throat tighten. "Jerry, shouldn't we call?" "No one's coming," he said. "Not here. Not ever." He waved me off without looking back. "Get to the cabin, and remember the rules." I hesitated, one breath, two. Then the ground beneath the garage gave a faint, hollow thud. Jerry stopped mid-stride. "Damn it," he whispered. He sprinted the last 20 feet. I didn't wait. I ran in the opposite direction, toward the cabin, toward safety, if such a thing existed here. And behind me, deep beneath the garage floor, something let out a long, hungry exhale, like it knew my footsteps, like it already missed me. I didn't stop running until the cabin door slammed shut behind me. My hands were shaking too badly to turn the deadbolt on the first try. I fumbled, cursed under my breath, then forced it into place. The metal clicked, loud, final, desperate. Silence followed, a heavy silence, thick enough to muffle the blood pounding in my ears. I pressed my back against the door and slid down until I hit the floor, chest rising and falling like I'd sprinted miles. The cabin felt too small, too quiet, too aware. I didn't even bother taking off my boots. Jerry's words kept bouncing through my skull like loose bolts in an engine. "It likes new voices. It remembers a world without us. Nothing here is supernatural." I didn't know which part terrified me most. Eventually, my breathing evened out. The lights hummed overhead, soft, steady, the only sign that electricity still obeyed human laws here. I scanned the cabin. Nothing had changed. Same narrow bed, same metal sink, same clock on the wall ticking just a little too slowly. I checked the windows, curtains drawn, no cracks, no gaps. Good. Jerry told me to sleep early, but the idea of closing my eyes now, no chance. I sat on the bed, elbows on my knees, trying to brace myself for the night. For the rules. Rule 1, don't answer what calls after dark. Rule 2, no outsiders. Rule 3, never step outside when you're alone. Rule 4, don't let it hear fear. Rule 5, don't look at the trees too long. There were others too, ones Jerry hadn't said out loud but hinted at with small, loaded glances and unfinished sentences. Eventually the sun began to drop. Shadows stretched across the cabin walls like long fingers. The ticking clock seemed to slow even further, the sound thickening with each talk. The light outside turned the color of amber, then rust, then bruises. Night was coming, and with it, whatever the hell called my name. I turned on every light in the cabin. Kitchen, bathroom, hall lamp, overhead. Warm light filled the small space, pushing the shadows back into corners where they vibrated faintly like they were waiting their turn. I sat with my back against the wall, facing the door, and waited. The first sound came at just after midnight. A soft tap, not at the door, not at the window, on the roof. A single, careful tap-tap, like fingertips. Testing the wood, testing me. My breath paused, the tapping stopped for several minutes. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks directly above the bed. My pulse quickened. I pressed a hand over my mouth like I could hide the sound of breathing from whatever pressed itself to the shingles above me. Don't answer what calls after dark, but it wasn't calling my name, not yet. A slow scrape followed, like something dragging its weight across the roofline. Not claws, not nails, something softer, more deliberate, a long pull, then a whisper. Right above my head, so close the vibrations trembled through the beams, not a voice I recognized, not the mimic from last night, not the thing under the concrete. This one was higher, more inquisitive. New one. I shut my eyes. The whisper came again, seeping through the ceiling like smoke through a vent. New. Blood. The temperature in the cabin dropped. My breath fogged in front of me. The lights flickered twice, but held. Something slithered down the exterior wall. The sound was unmistakable, skin, or something skin-like, dragging slowly over wood. Then came the second voice, from the opposite side of the cabin. Low, wet, familiar. The breath from under the garage. You ran from me. The cabin walls rattled, not violently, not aggressively, just enough to show they were no longer mine. I backed into the corner, heart hammering. Another whisper, this one at the window. Let us see you. A shadow moved behind the closed curtain, tall, long, wrong in its proportions. It lingered, tilted, stopped breathing entirely. I couldn't move. Cold sweat rolled down my spine. The whisper at the window grew quieter, closer. Just one look. The whisper above me responded, amused. He knows the rules. A third voice, behind the door, laughed softly, a sound like gravel in a throat. They always break eventually. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't answer. Don't look. Don't open. Don't breathe too loud. The cabin filled with whispers, 3 voices weaving into each other until they were indistinguishable. A chorus of ancient things, hungry things, things that wanted me. And then a knock at the door. Gentle, ordinary, human. Kid, Jerry said, open up. It's me. My heart stopped. Jerry told me never to open the door after dark. And outside, the voices fell perfectly silent, waiting, smiling in the dark. Jerry's voice lingered in the air like a scent, familiar, grounded, exactly what I wanted to believe. Too perfect, too well-timed. The kind of thing a frightened mind would reach for, or the kind of thing something outside could steal. I didn't move. The silence after his knock was absolute. Not a single whisper, not a scrape. Not the soft shifting I'd heard crawling across the roof. Everything outside the cabin held its breath. Waiting, listening, testing. Jerry knocked again, softer this time, so gentle it was almost tender. Kid, he said, voice warm with concern. You all right in there? My pulse pounded so loudly I thought the door might hear it. My mouth was dry, too dry. Say something, he urged. You've been alone too long. Open up. No. Jerry never talked like that. Too soft, too emotional, too inviting. I stayed silent. The voice outside took a small breath, sharp, like someone adjusting a mask that didn't quite fit. Then it said, come on now, you can trust me. I nearly choked. Jerry had never, not once, told me to trust him. He'd told me rules, he'd told me warnings, he'd told me what not to do, but he never offered comfort. Not like that. Not sweet, not gentle. The thing outside the door shifted tone instantly, like flipping a switch. Kid, it said again. Same pitch, same cadence, but colder, flattened. Like it had learned enough human speech to imitate it, but not enough to understand the pieces that mattered. It knocked a third time. Slow, measured. Precisely 3 taps. Tap, tap, tap. Then the whispers resumed. Not from the door, not even from the walls, from the ground. Low. Wet, heavy breaths swelling beneath the cabin floorboards. It followed me here. I backed up until my spine hit the far wall. The floor vibrated as if something enormous shifted its weight beneath the foundation, like the earth itself was inhaling. The door handle twitched, just once. A soft metallic jolt, almost shy. Then, again, stronger this time. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. A voice, too close, too bright, pressed its mouth right against the wood grain. Let me in. Not Jerry's voice. Not even pretending to be anymore. Another voice, the high one from the roof, giggled above me. A rasping, unhinged sound. He's scared. You hear it? A deeper voice replied from the window, vibrating the glass. He's learning. They always learn the wrong parts first. The thing under the floor dragged its breath outward, filling the cabin with a sound like water forcing its way up a clogged drain. I clamped a hand over my mouth. The last light bulb flickered, dimmed, glowed weakly. No, not now. Not now. I moved without thinking. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer beside the bed and squeezed it so hard my knuckles popped. It was small, plastic, probably useless against anything older than the concept of fear. But it was something. Another knock rattled the door. Harder. Kid, the false Jerry hissed. If you open this door, I'll make the noises stop. I pressed my back against the wall and whispered to myself, barely audible, don't answer. Don't open it. Don't break a rule. Don't break a rule. The whispers outside grew angrier, faster, overlapping like insects chewing through wood. Let us see you. Show your face. You ran. You ran. You ran. We remember before you. Open the door. Open, open, open. The entire cabin shuddered. Something slammed the roof hard enough to rain dust onto my shoulders. Something clawed at the siding. Something paced in the gravel outside, each footstep too slow, too patient, like a predator circling a trapped animal. Then, from somewhere far away, a sound cut clean through the chaos. A horn, a long, sharp, familiar blast. Harris's truck horn. Everything stopped, the voices, the scraping, the pacing. Even the thing under the floor froze, like prey hearing a hunter. Another horn blast, closer. The shadows outside retreated, not like animals, like smoke sucked backward through cracks, like they were being pulled away, dragged away. The false Jerry's voice hissed one last time through clenched teeth. He will not always save you. Silence. Then the sound of a truck engine idling, gravel shifting under tires, a slam of a door, boot steps, real ones. Measured, heavy, unimpressed. Jerry's real voice cut through the dark. Kid, open the door. And this time, I did. The night air hit me first, sharp, cold, clean. Jerry stood there, expression carved from stone, one hand on the doorknob, the other gripping a long metal rod I'd never seen before. Not a tool, not a weapon. Something older. Something with symbols carved deep into the handle. He looked me over once. You didn't answer them, he said. Good. Behind him, the dark tree line pulsed faintly, like something massive had just slipped back beneath the earth. Jerry stepped aside. Come on, he said. You're not sleeping here tonight. Why not? He stared at the roof. The shingles were split, not scratched, not dented. Split, like something heavy had pressed down hard enough to crack them in a perfect circular shape. Because, he said quietly, you've been marked now. He nodded toward the truck. And we need to talk about what happens next. Jerry didn't speak as we crossed the gravel. He didn't have to. Something in the air had changed. A tension pulled tight, humming low like an electrical line about to snap. The cabin behind me felt abandoned already, as though the moment I stepped out, it had returned to whatever thing watched it from below. Jerry opened the passenger door of his truck and jerked his chin. Get in. I climbed inside, still gripping the flashlight like a talisman. My hands trembled. The cab smelled like motor oil, metal shavings, and pine, normal things, solid things. For a second, I thought the scent alone might hold me together. Jerry climbed in, slammed the door, and locked it. Not habit. Procedure. The engine's rumble was the only sound as he pulled away from the cabin. I watched the woods pass through the window, shadows stretched tall and thin beneath the moonlight. They leaned in as the truck moved, as if trying to keep pace with us, listening. Only when we hit the main dirt road did Jerry finally speak. You broke Rule 3 tonight. My stomach tightened. I didn't leave the cabin. You ran, he said quietly. You panicked. It heard that. It felt that. And it liked it. He shifted gears and the truck climbed a small incline. You locked the door. Good. You kept the lights on. Good. But you listened to it too long. He shot me a sidelong glance. It's not supposed to get that close on your first week. What does that mean? I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he guided the truck down a narrow dirt path I hadn't noticed before, one almost completely swallowed by trees. Branches scraped the sides like fingers dragging along metal. Finally, he said, it remembers people in two ways, by habit or by fear. The wind rushed in through the vents, rattling. You were new, he continued, just another warm body on the property. It hadn't chosen a reason to notice you yet. And now it has? Oh, yeah, he exhaled. Now it's got your scent, your voice, the rhythm of your footsteps, the way your breathing spikes when you're scared. You've been marked. The word hung in the cab like a weight. Then what was it doing tonight? Testing you, Jerry said simply, seeing if you're weak enough to open a door, if you'll try to run, if you'll talk back, if you'll break. And if I did, he stared straight ahead, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. The truck dipped into a shallow gully before climbing again. We approached a clearing, one I'd never seen during the day. It wasn't a building, not a service shed, not even a storage lot. It was a pit. A wide, circular depression in the earth with wooden posts surrounding it like a crude fence. The ground inside was blackened, smooth, glassy in some places. Something like charcoal dust coated the edges. Jerry parked at the rim. "What is this?" I whispered. "A place it won't cross," he said. "Not easily." "Why not?" Jerry tapped the dashboard, then pointed at the wooden posts. Carved into each one were symbols, deeply gouged, primitive, older than lettering but deliberate in their pattern, the same engravings from the metal rod he held earlier. "I didn't make these," he said. "The men who worked here before me didn't make them either." "Then who?" Jerry stepped out of the truck. I followed, legs unsteady. The night felt different here, clearer, like the air wasn't being watched or listened through. Jerry stood beside the pit, staring into it as though expecting something to move. This land was a mechanic's shop for maybe 40 years. Before that, it was a farm. Before that, logging. Before that, just forest. But no matter who lived here, no matter the job, there was always something they had to follow. "The rules," I said. He nodded once. "The rules aren't ours. They're older. They're what keep it from walking through your front door in broad daylight." A cold breeze blew across the clearing. Jerry lowered himself to sit on the truck's bumper. "You're marked now," he said, "which means it's going to be interested. It's going to try things, new things." My voice was barely audible. "Like mimicking you." He snorted. "Badly. I don't sweet talk or coax, and that thing, whatever it is, doesn't understand people. It only understands need." The branches overhead swayed, creaked, whispered. "So what do I do?" "For now," Jerry folded his arms, "stay close to me. Follow the rules exactly. No improvising, no testing boundaries, and no listening to anything that sounds like it wants something from you." I swallowed, throat tight. "Jerry, how long have you been dealing with this?" A long, slow breath. "Long enough," he said. "Swara, long enough to know it doesn't lose interest. It waits, it circles, it wears you down, it tries to wedge itself into your thoughts." Silence settled like dust. Then he added, almost reluctantly, "And it only marks people it thinks will eventually break." The clearing felt suddenly colder. The pit darker, the symbols weaker. "You think I'll break?" I asked. Jerry didn't look at me. "I think," he said, "that's what it wants." He pushed himself off the bumper. "Come on, sun comes up in 4 hours. I'll be damned if we're out here when it does." "Why?" He opened the truck door. "Because it's not the night you gotta worry about," he said without turning. "It's the hours right before dawn. That's when it's oldest, when it remembers what it used to be." The trees shivered. Something in the distance groaned low, like a hill shifting in its sleep. "We should go," Jerry said. As we drove away, I looked once over my shoulder, just in time to see a long, thin crack appear in the ground at the center of the pit, as if something beneath was testing the boundary and smiling. I didn't sleep, not really. My body shut down for an hour at most, but my mind stayed awake, floating, listening, while the night pressed itself against the thin motel walls like it wanted to seep through. Most people don't know this, but there's a particular kind of silence that exists only in Ohio's flatlands. It's not peaceful. It's not empty. It's expectant, like darkness holding its breath. That's the silence that dragged me up from whatever half-dream I'd slipped into. At first, I thought the noise was part of the dream, a wet, dragging scrape coming from the floorboards beneath the bed, but then it came again. Slower, heavier, real. I sat up. The room was dim, only lit by the cheap red-orange glare from the neon vacancy sign bleeding through the curtains. The light pulsed faintly every few seconds, washing the walls in sickly color. Scrape. From under the bed. No, not under. Beneath the building, something dragging itself along concrete, something that remembered me. I swung my legs over the edge of the mattress, heart slamming in my ribs. The boards felt too thin, too hollow, like my weight alone might be enough to punch through them. For a moment, I don't know how long, I just sat there holding my breath, waiting to hear it again, hoping I wouldn't. But the motel answered. Scrape, drag, scrape, a slow, deliberate rhythm, like something testing the boundaries of the earth itself. I backed away, moving toward the wall phone, something old enough it still had a cord. I didn't know who I planned to call. Police? Frank? Anyone. The odds of being believed were less than zero. Still, my hand hovered over the receiver. Then came a voice. Not from the floor, from the wall. A whisper so faint I only noticed it because it vibrated against the motel's cheap wooden paneling. Don't run. My skin crawled. My vision blurred at the edges. It sounded like me. Not exactly. A version of me. A version worn thin, tired, strained. I pressed my ear to the paneling against every instinct I had left. Don't run, the voice murmured again, echoing deeper, warped by whatever space existed behind the walls. It follows movement. It knows motion. Stay still. I jerked back so fast I nearly tripped over the bed. For a second, I considered bolting out the door, sprinting into the cold night, into the parking lot, anywhere but here. But the whisper, my whisper, kept threading through the walls. It comes for those who forget. Be still. Forget. The rules. The ones Frank tried to tell me but never finished. The ones carved into the shop walls. The ones written in the deep ruts and grooves of the concrete beneath my boots every morning. Maybe this thing, whatever it was, wasn't hunting me out of hunger. Maybe it was punishing me. For ignorance. For arrogance. For stepping into a place that wasn't meant for me. Scrape. Scrape. Drag. The sound was directly beneath the nightstand now, something enormous moving with slow, careful intention. Like it knew exactly where I was. The walls throbbed, my teeth vibrated, the motel lights flickered, humming with a sudden low electrical surge. I crouched down, trying to keep my breath steady, staring at the floor. One of the planks bowed upward, just slightly, but enough. A faint bulge rising as if pushed by something forcing its way up from below. Then came a different sound, one I hadn't heard before. Not dragging, not scraping, tapping. A single, deliberate tap against the underside of the floorboard. Then another, like someone trying to signal or knock. It was rhythmic. 3 taps, a pause, 3 taps again. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because I recognized the pattern. Frank had tapped that on the garage door the night he left. Absent-mindedly. Like a habit, like someone who'd done it 1,000 times. I hadn't thought anything of it. But now it felt like a code. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, a warning, or a question, or a command. My mind raced, trying to connect things that didn't want to connect. What had Frank said? Some things don't belong there, but they remember. Remember. That word again. What did it remember? Me, him? The rules? The tapping came a 3rd time, this time harder, more insistent. 3 sharp whacks that lifted the floorboard half an inch, and that's when I saw it. In the narrow gap between plank and concrete, a color. Not a shape, not an eye, a color. Something impossible. A shade I'd never seen before and wasn't meant to see. Something like bruised twilight mixed with old blood and deep-sea pressure. A color that made my stomach drop and my vision swim. I scrambled backward, choking on air. The floorboard snapped upward another inch, cracking down the middle. The color deepened, and then a low exhale filled the motel room. A breath dragged through miles of earth. Hot, damp, ancient. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end. Whatever lived under that garage, under this entire patch of Ohio, was here, close enough that I could feel its presence leaning against the boundary between worlds. For the first time, I understood the rule carved above the shop entrance. Don't acknowledge it. Too late. The breath moved again, this time forming something like a word, a sound shaped with intention. Mechanic. My throat closed, my jaw locked. The air around me felt sharp, cold, metallic. It knew what I was. Maybe it always had. Then knocking. Real knocking. From the door. Fast. Panicked. Kid, open up. Don't move. Just open the damn door. Frank. Alive. Breathing hard, I stumbled to my feet, nearly tripping over my own panic, and lunged for the handle. The moment I touched it, the floor behind me cracked open with a deafening snap. The color surged upward. I yanked the door. Frank grabbed my shirt, pulled me out, slammed the door behind us, and the entire room shook as something enormous struck the floor from below. Frank didn't wait. He shoved me toward his truck. "Don't look back," he growled, "and whatever you do, don't speak to it." We reached the truck. He shoved me inside, started the engine, and peeled out of the parking lot as the motel lights behind us flickered and died all at once. Neither of us spoke, not for a long time. Not until the motel was just a dark smudge behind the trees and the road stretched out in front of us like veins leading deeper into the unknown. Then Frank finally exhaled. "You weren't supposed to hear it," he whispered. His hands shook on the wheel. "And now it knows you can." Frank didn't slow down, not once. His truck tore through the back roads like the night behind us had a mouth and teeth and a reason to chase. The engine roared, gravel spat out in frantic bursts, and the headlights carved tunnels through the mist gathering over the asphalt. I kept waiting for him to explain. He didn't. Not for miles. And that silence, that was somehow worse than the breathing under the motel floor. We hit a long stretch of road with no streetlights, no farmhouses, nothing but a horizon swallowed in black cornfields. Frank finally loosened his grip on the wheel, just barely, and let out a low, shaking breath. "You shouldn't have heard it," he said again, quieter this time. "Most folks don't. Hell, I've been working that shop nearly 30 years, and I've only heard it twice." He looked older in the dim glow of the dash lights. Not just tired, haunted. His jaw was tight, his eyes hollowed out like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. "What is it?" I asked. My voice came out thin, almost childlike. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a dented silver flask, unscrewed the top with shaking fingers, took a burning swallow, and did something I'd never seen him do before. He crossed himself. "We don't know what it is," he said finally, "but we know what it does." The truck bounced over a pothole. My shoulder slammed into the door, but I barely felt it. "It remembers," I murmured, hearing again the warped whisper seeping through the motel paneling, the version of my own voice telling me not to move. Frank tensed. His eyes snapped to me. "What did it say?" I swallowed hard. "It told me not to run, not to move. And then it said mechanic, like it knew what I was, like it's been watching." Frank pulled the truck onto the gravel shoulder so suddenly that the tires fishtailed, spraying dirt into the cornfields. He killed the engine. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Neither did I. The air felt different out here. Too thick, too heavy, as though something was listening. Frank twisted in his seat, face lit only by distant lightning flickering far beyond the horizon. "Listen to me," he said. "You need to understand this before we go any farther, before you decide if you're staying or running." He leaned closer. His voice dropped to a rasp meant only for me. "There are cracks in Ohio," he said, "not like earthquake cracks, older. Deep, far older than the land, older than anything human. Places where the world's thin enough that something underneath can press its face against it." My blood ran cold. "It's not underground the same way we mean it," he continued. "It's beneath everything, beneath the rules that keep reality from unraveling, beneath the bones of the earth." He swallowed hard. "Those cracks show up in certain places, old wells, abandoned mines, sometimes in cheap buildings thrown up without knowing what's below." He met my eyes, the headlights reflecting a fear too raw to hide. "And the shop, it's built right on top of one." A tremor ran up my spine. "But what does it want?" I whispered. Frank let out a long, shaky sigh. "It wants to be known," he said, "to be acknowledged. That's the worst part. It doesn't want to kill us. Not at first. It wants us to hear it, see it, let it in." A pause. "And once you let it in, it learns you." The wind outside changed direction suddenly, slamming against the truck like a hard shove. The cornfields swayed violently, though the air had been still seconds before. Frank stared out at the moving rows. "It learned me years ago," he said, "but I never answered it, never spoke back, never stepped off the rules. That's why I'm still alive." His gaze slid slowly toward me. "But you heard its voice, and you looked." Lightning flashed again, closer this time. The sky went white for an instant, lighting up a distant silo and a lone billboard half swallowed by vines. Frank twisted the key but didn't start the engine. "Kid, once you hear it, the world changes. Places shift. Roads don't stay the same. You'll start noticing bends that shouldn't exist, dead ends where there weren't any. It'll guide you if you let it. pull you toward cracks. A prickling sensation crawled up my arms. I looked out the window. The cornfield was still waving unnaturally, gusts of wind that didn't match the sky, rows bending inward, forming subtle channels, as though something unseen was moving through them and heading toward us. "Frank, start the truck." He didn't. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "There's something else," he murmured. "Something you need to see for yourself. Because if you stay, if you choose this life, you need to understand exactly what it asks of you." He pointed down the road. Except, my stomach lurched. The road wasn't the same one we'd driven in on. We'd stopped on a straight stretch, clean asphalt, old telephone poles, clear horizon. But now, the road ahead bent sharply to the left, a bend that hadn't been there, a bend that twisted into the corn like a warped spine leading deeper into darkness. My breath hitched. "Frank, that wasn't there." "No," he said. "It wasn't." He finally turned the ignition. The engine sputtered, caught, then growled alive like it was afraid of the thing that had made the road curve. "We're going down it," Frank said. "What? Why?" "Because it's already opened a path. If we don't follow it, it'll open another, closer. You can't ignore it once it starts showing you the way." He hit the gas, hard. The truck lurched forward, gravel exploding behind us as we shot toward the bend. I gripped the armrest. "Where does it lead?" I whispered. Frank's knuckles turned white around the wheel. "To the shop," he said. Lightning cracked overhead, and to the thing under it. The truck tore through the darkness, and the cornfields closed in like walls, bending unnaturally toward us. Every row seemed to sway in response to the engine's vibration, forming corridors that should not have existed in any map, any plan, any sane geometry. I stared out the windshield, nausea crawling up my throat. The horizon was gone. The stars, the moon, everything above had been swallowed by a smoky, black haze that stretched down to meet the tops of the corn. The road bent again, subtly, unnaturally, leading us toward a place that should have been several miles away but was impossibly close. Frank didn't speak. His eyes were locked on the road, or the void beyond it, hands tight on the wheel. The truck's headlights cut jagged lines into the fog, illuminating fragments of the corn that seemed to twitch and lean as though alive. I swallowed hard. This isn't a road. It's moving. Frank's jaw tightened. It's not the road. It's the world. It's bending. Only where it wants you to go. Only where it's curious. And it's curious about you now. "What does that mean?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He exhaled slowly. "It's testing you. Learning what you fear, learning what you'll obey, the cracks under the shop, what you saw, what I've felt for decades. They aren't just breaks in the earth. They're holes in reality, places where it can reach through without fully stepping into our world. That's why it calls you, whispers like you're already part of it." The truck hit another bend, tighter this time, and I felt my stomach drop. My hands dug into the armrest. "And if I fail?" Frank didn't answer immediately. The hum of the engine and the swaying corn seemed to press against us, squeezing, waiting for his words. Finally, he said, "It doesn't just take you. It waits. Patiently. It shows you things, tempts you, pulls at what you remember and what you think is real. And then, if it likes what it finds, it begins to reshape the rules around you." I swallowed. My mouth was dry, my throat tight. "So, there's no coming back?" Frank's eyes flicked to mine for the first time since we left the motel. They were hard, weathered, and absolute. "Not if it wants you. Not if it's decided you're marked, and you're marked. Don't forget that." Another bend. The fog thickened, smearing the corn into jagged, impossible shapes. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, slipping through the rows as if something beneath them was moving in tandem with our truck. The engine growled and Frank shifted gears, navigating the impossible curves with a precision that was almost inhuman. I noticed then the way he wasn't driving by sight alone. The truck seemed to respond to the unseen, as if he could feel the bends in the world before they arrived. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Why not leave me for it?" He didn't answer immediately. His hands never left the wheel. His gaze never wavered. Then, slowly, "Because someone has to know what it does. Someone has to survive. If it claims everyone without teaching them the rules, it wins completely. And that's not how this works. The road, or the void pretending to be one, shifted again, tilting downward. Fog thickened into a low cloud, and I could feel the moisture brushing against my skin. A low hum began under the tires, vibrating through the metal of the truck. "Do you feel that?" Frank murmured. I did. A resonance, deep and wet, crawling under the asphalt like the pulse of something massive moving just beneath the ground. My stomach clenched, my chest tightened. "It's under the shop," he said, his voice tight. "It knows we're here. It knows you're coming back." I glanced at him. "You faced it before?" Frank's hands clenched the wheel. "More times than I can count, and every time it's different. Every time, it remembers more of me. I've survived only because I follow the rules. And now, you have to learn them too." The truck descended a slight incline and the fog thinned. I could see the edges of the shop now, distant but impossibly close. The structure seemed off. Straight lines warped subtly, angles too sharp or too obtuse. It leaned toward us, almost breathing. The air itself hummed. I felt it pressing against my ears, my throat, my lungs. The world seemed to contract, narrowing to this stretch of road, this bend, this building that should not exist in the geometry of Ohio. Frank slowed the truck as we approached the threshold. He killed the engine. Silence fell over the cab. Not ordinary silence. This was heavier, denser, charged. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full of patience and waiting. He turned to me. His eyes were grave. "Once we cross that threshold, you follow the rules. Every single one. No improvisation. You do exactly what I show you. One mistake, one glance, one word, and it remembers it. It never forgets." I nodded, gripping the edge of the seat. My body was trembling, but my mind was sharp. The rules. Remember the rules. Frank opened his door and stepped out. The cold night hit me like a wall. The shop sat ahead, a dark silhouette warped by shadows, almost alive in its shape. The air smelled faintly metallic and wet, a scent that made my stomach roil. "Stay in the truck," Frank said, voice low. "Watch. Learn. Don't breathe unless I tell you. Don't." The first floorboard creaked behind the shop. Something beneath the ground shifted, and I realized with a sick certainty it had been waiting for this moment. It remembered, and it knew we had returned. Frank led the way. Each step he took across the cracked gravel was deliberate, measured, as if he could feel the vibrations of something slithering just beneath the earth. I followed, clutching the flashlight like it was a lifeline. The beam trembled in my hands, painting the warped exterior of the shop with fractured, stuttering light. The building looked ordinary at first glance. Corrugated metal walls, a pair of rusted overhead doors. But the closer we got, the more it seemed wrong. The walls pulsed subtly, bending inward and outward as though the structure itself were breathing. "Stay close," Frank whispered. "And whatever you do, don't touch anything you aren't told to." I nodded, swallowing hard. My fingers tightened around the flashlight, knuckles whitening. The gravel crunched beneath our boots. I could feel the vibration of the earth, low, wet, deliberate. Something under the foundation shifted in time with our movements, testing us, gauging our weight, our fear. Frank stopped at the threshold. One hand rested lightly on the rusted door. The other gripped the metal rod he always carried, the one etched with those incomprehensible symbols. "Remember Rule 1, he murmured. "Never answer what calls you after dark. Not its whispers, not its voices, not even if it sounds like someone you trust." I nodded again, but a cold dread knotted in my stomach. The air around the shop had that wet metallic scent, the one that had made my stomach turn the night at the motel. It was thicker now, pressing against my skin, invading my lungs. Frank pushed open the door. The hinges groaned, a long, keening sound that seemed almost like a scream. Inside, darkness swallowed us immediately, thick and oppressive. The flashlight beam quivered as I swept it across the interior. Tools lined the walls, neatly arranged, but the air felt alive. Not with movement, but with intent. Something lurked beneath the floor. I could feel it, the vibration of its breath, the low, wet pulse of its presence. I tried not to look at the shadows, but they moved anyway, curling and twisting at the edges of the light. Frank led me to the center of the shop. He stopped and knelt, tracing a circle into the dust with the tip of his rod. Symbols, ancient, jagged, deliberate, etched themselves into the layer of grime. "This is where it waits," he said. His voice was calm, but there was steel behind it. "It can reach through the cracks. It can mimic anyone, anything. But it cannot cross these symbols without my permission. Not fully." I leaned closer, squinting at the lines. The shapes seemed to twist under the flashlight, forming angles that should have been impossible. My mind rebelled at them, trying to assign logic, to rationalize. But the deeper I looked, the less sense they made. A low thump reverberated through the floor. The vibration passed up my legs. The building groaned. I froze. "Rule 2, Frank said, voice steady. "No outsider steps onto this property unless I say so. You're not an outsider anymore, you're learning. That counts." Another thump. Closer. The floor trembled. My pulse spiked. I swallowed hard. "It's under there, isn't it?" Frank didn't answer. He just gestured for me to stand inside the circle. I obeyed. The dust shifted beneath my boots, the vibrations stronger here, as though the entity beneath us was testing the boundaries of the symbols. A faint whisper slithered through the air, not from one place, but from everywhere at once. "Mechanic." My blood ran cold. It sounded like my voice. Frank tightened his grip on the rod. "Don't answer. Don't react. Remember the rules." Another whisper. Warped, layered, impossible. You left. I could feel it pressing up through the floorboards, patient, hungry for acknowledgement. Its breath was damp, metallic, and ancient. The vibration thrummed against my chest, my skull, my bones. I shut my eyes, trying to focus. The rules. Rule 1, don't answer. Don't move. Don't break the line. Then Frank spoke quietly. "It's testing fear now, your hesitation, your doubt. That's why it called to you. That's why it tried to mimic Jerry at the cabin." Another thump. This one louder, like a fist against concrete. The floor shifted under my feet, tilting slightly, almost imperceptibly. I opened my eyes. The shop seemed alive. The walls breathed with a slow rhythm. The lights flickered in response to the vibrations, and the shadows twisted toward the circle as if reaching for me. Frank's hand tightened around the rod. "It wants you to panic, wants you to break the rules, and if you do, it will remember it. Every fear, every mistake, every hesitation, and it will use it against you." A long, slow breath rose from beneath the floor. I could feel it in my chest, a wet, gurgling exhale that made my hair stand on end. The symbols on the floor glowed faintly, cold, blue light seeping up from the dust. Frank motioned for me to kneel. I did. Every muscle in my body was tense, every nerve screaming, but I obeyed. "Rule 3, he whispered. "No improvisation. Follow exactly what I show you. The moment you try to think you can outsmart it, you lose. Do you understand?" I nodded. The floor groaned again, louder this time, like something enormous shifting beneath us. The blue glow of the symbols pulsed. The air thickened, pressing against my lungs. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, layered, impossible to parse. Then Frank raised the rod. The glow intensified. The vibration under our feet became almost unbearable. "Now," he said, "watch carefully. Learn this. And don't speak. Not a word." From beneath the floor, a shadow began to rise. Not an ordinary shadow. Not the absence of light. A shape, dark and fluid, stretching upward, pressing against the circle of symbols. Its edges blurred like smoke and water. It didn't move in the way living things do. It moved in a way that only something not of this world could. I held my breath. It stopped at the edge of the circle, half solid, half impossible. Its presence pressed against my mind, probing, testing. I could feel memories, fears, doubts, everything I tried to keep hidden, tugged at, pulled, rearranged. Frank's voice cut through it. "Remember, it cannot fully enter here. Not yet. Not while you follow the rules." A whisper. My whisper slithered around the shop. "Why are you here? Why are you here?" I swallowed hard, forced my hands to stay still. The rules. Rule 1, don't answer. The shape pulsed like it inhaled. A wet, sickly sound that resonated through the concrete. Frank's eyes met mine. "This is only the beginning. You follow me. You learn. If you falter, it will never forget. and it will never let you leave. I nodded again, my heart hammered so violently I thought it would burst. The thing beneath the shop pulsed, breathed, waited, patient, ancient, knowing. And I realized, with a chill deep in my bones, I had crossed into a world that didn't belong to me, a world with rules older than time, and it would remember me forever. I immediately froze, my hands slipping from the edge of the workbench. Whatever was beneath the floor had stopped moving, as if it were listening to me now. 1 pulse, 2 pulses, 3. I held my breath until my lungs burned, until my chest ached, until I thought my heart would burst. Then, crack. A fine fissure ran along the concrete, inching forward as if something beneath was pushing upward. I could see it clearly. Not imagined. Not a trick of the light. It was pressing. The chair I had been sitting in toppled over with a sharp clang. The thing beneath the floor responded immediately. No longer the steady, rhythmic breathing, it now emitted a wet, gurgling, dragging sound, like something immense awakening after centuries of slumber. My heart slammed against my ribs. My entire body trembled. Frank remained kneeling inside the protective circle, hands gripping his metal rod, eyes fixed on the pale streaks across the floor. He hadn't blinked once. "Calm," he hissed, each word slicing the air. "It's testing you. Remember Rule 3, no improvisation." The entity beneath didn't strike directly. Instead, it pulled, pressed, distorted, compressing the space around us. The concrete vibrated with each movement, like standing atop a massive spring about to snap. Whispers returned, not one voice, but dozens, overlapping, all of them twisted versions of mine, Frank's, even Harris's. Wrong, afraid, forget, break. Panic clawed at me. I wanted to run, to scream, to step out of the circle, to look down the fissure, but Frank's hand pressed heavily onto my shoulder. Solid, anchoring. "Breathe. Watch. Do not respond," he murmured. I inhaled shakily. The air was thick, metallic, damp. The instinct to move, to flee, to even glance at the spreading crack was overwhelming, but I held myself still, eyes locked on Frank and the glowing symbols under his knees. Then I saw it. Partially, fleetingly, yet unmistakable, a shape rising from the fissure. Not fully solid, not fully liquid, dark, viscous, with hues of deep purple and black swirling within it. It pressed upward, testing the boundaries of the circle. A part of me screamed, "Run, run, run!" Another part, trained by Frank, remembered. Rules. Stay within the circle, do not respond. The breathing, or whatever it was doing, shifted. Wet, slow, deliberate. Every pulse resonated through my bones, my chest, even my skull. Frank's voice cut through it like a knife. "It wants you to panic, to break the rules. That's why it called you. That's why it mimicked Jerry at the cabin." Another tremor shook the floor. The concrete seemed to tilt slightly, a disorienting lurch. I opened my eyes wider. The shop itself felt alive. Walls subtly breathed. The fluorescent lights flickered in rhythm with the pulses beneath. Shadows stretched toward the protective circle like fingers. Frank lifted the rod, tracing additional lines in the dust around the circle. The symbols glowed brighter, a cold bluish light that pushed against the darkness, creeping from the fissure. The entity recoiled slightly, as though recognizing the boundary. "Rule 4, Frank whispered, never breaking his gaze from the shadow beneath. "Do not assume you understand it. Do not assume you can anticipate it. Respect the distance. Always." A stronger pulse vibrated beneath us, sending dust motes floating in the glow of the symbols. The shadow tested the edge of the circle again, advancing, withdrawing, impossibly fluid. Its presence pressed against my mind, probing memories, fears, doubts, all the things I tried to hide, pulling, tugging, rearranging. Frank leaned closer, voice low. "It remembers every tremor of fear, every hesitation. Every time you falter, it files it away, piece by piece, and it will use it against you." My body trembled, but I forced myself to kneel as he instructed. My hands pressed against the dusty floor, the vibration throbbing under my palms. The whispers intensified, warping into dozens of overlapping voices, repeating my own name, echoing my thoughts, mocking my fear. Then Frank raised the rod. The circle's glow flared, bluish light slicing through the darkness. The floor shuddered violently underfoot. The shadow surged upward, half-formed, almost solid now, pressing against the edge of the circle. Its presence was a weight in my chest, a pressure in my skull. It inhaled, or at least I felt the inhuman rhythm of its pulse, wet and ancient. Frank's eyes locked on mine. This is just the beginning. You follow exactly what I show you. One mistake, one glance, one thought of defiance, and it will remember, and it will never let you leave. I nodded, heart hammering, sweat running down my temple. The shadow pulsed again, breathing, waiting. Patient, immense, intelligent. And I realized with a bone-deep chill, I had entered a world that was not meant for me, a world ruled by rules older than memory, and it would remember me forever. The shadow pulsed at the edge of the circle, its mass shifting, writhing, almost sentient. It wasn't moving in the way anything in this world should. It was probing, learning, testing. My heart hammered in my chest like a drum, each beat syncing with the vibrations beneath the shop floor. Frank whispered, "Rule 5, never flinch at its movements. Never react to what it shows you. You obey. You endure. That's all you do." I swallowed hard and nodded, forcing my knees to the dust, palms pressed flat against the rough concrete. The air was thick and wet, tasting metallic like old blood mixed with iron and ozone. I could feel the presence of the entity pressing through my bones, cold, patient, calculating. Then it began. Shapes began to form along the edges of the circle, faint at first like smoke or mist, but then sharper, more defined. I saw faces I recognized. Harris, back at the garage, smiling as if nothing were wrong. My mother, standing in the kitchen, looking concerned. Jerry from the cabin calling my name. "Don't answer," Frank hissed. "Not a word, not a gesture. Don't even think it can be real." My throat tightened. I wanted to shout, wanted to run into the figures, to reach them. Every instinct screamed at me to step outside the circle. But the moment my mind flinched, the vibration beneath the floor intensified, almost violent. My palms felt the trembling, and the shadow reacted, pulsing faster, sharper, as if feeding off my hesitation. The faces shifted, now grotesque. Smiles stretched too wide, eyes too hollow, voices too warped. The whispering became layered, incoherent yet intelligible at the same time. "You're mine," one voice hissed. You left me," another moaned. I closed my eyes, forcing my mind onto the rules. The circle, Frank, the rod. Do not respond, do not move, do not speak. Minutes or hours passed. Time lost meaning. Each pulse of the floor, each flicker of the shadow, each whisper of voices seemed to stretch into eternity. My lungs burned, my back ached, my mind screamed with the temptation to escape, to reach out, to acknowledge the illusions it cast. And then Frank began to move. Slowly, deliberately, he traced a new symbol along the edge of the circle, holding the rod steady. The bluish glow flared brighter, a shield of light against the darkness pressing in. The shadow shrank slightly at the glow, curling back into the fissure. Its pulse slowed, but the whispering never ceased. I could feel it, coiling, intelligent, aware of every movement, every thought, every small lapse of courage. "It learns," Frank murmured, barely audible. "It remembers, it always remembers, and it tests the weak first. Those who hesitate, those who doubt." A new whisper slipped into my mind, not a voice I recognized, something older, deeper, almost beyond human comprehension. "You are fragile. You are small. You will fail." I forced my eyes open. I focused on the circle, on the glowing symbols, on Frank's hands steady on the rod. The fear coursing through me didn't vanish, but I buried it beneath obedience, beneath the ritual of following rules I barely understood. Slowly, the shadow recoiled entirely into the fissure. The vibration under the floor diminished, but it did not disappear. The whispering remained, soft, patient, promising inevitability. Frank exhaled, exhaustion heavy in his bones. "Good. You survived your first test, but don't think it's over. That was just the introduction. Tomorrow it will try again. Harder, closer, smarter, and it will always remember what you feared most tonight." I nodded, muscles trembling. My mind raced, replaying every movement, every thought, every heartbeat. I realized then the horrifying truth. Survival here wasn't about strength or even courage. It was about total, unflinching obedience to rules older than memory, older than Ohio, older than me. And if I failed even once, it would claim more than my fear. It would claim everything. The shop was silent now, save for the low, wet pulse beneath the floor, like a heartbeat waiting for the next chance. The world outside felt impossibly distant, irrelevant. All that mattered was the circle, the symbols, the rules, and the shadow, patient and intelligent, waiting to test me again. Frank finally stood, brushing dust from his knees. Rest now. You'll need it. Tomorrow, it will come at you in ways you cannot imagine. But remember, Rule 1, never answer what calls you after dark. And Rule 5, never assume you understand it. Do not forget that. I sank to the floor, my body shaking, my mind still caught in the whispering. Outside the circle, outside the shop, the world could collapse for all I cared. Here, inside the glowing boundary, every breath, every thought, every small movement was a battle for survival, and I realized with bone-deep certainty that this was only the beginning. The shadow had remembered me tonight, and it would never forget. The next morning, the shop smelled of oil, rust, and lingering fear. I woke on the concrete floor where I had collapsed, arms still trembling. Sunlight slanted through the corrugated metal walls, but even in the brightness, the shadows from last night lingered. Long, warped, impossible. Frank was already at the workbench, cleaning tools with deliberate care, as if the night's horrors had been nothing more than a bad dream. But I could feel it in the air, the pulse beneath the floor, slow now, but patient, waiting. "You're awake," he said, without looking up. His voice was calm, measured. "Good. Today, it will test you differently." I swallowed, still tasting metal in my mouth, still feeling the lingering tremors under my feet. Differently, how? Frank finally met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw the weight behind them. The man who had seemed almost superhumanly steady yesterday looked tired today, strained. It can reach beyond the circle. Today, it will try to manipulate the world outside it, not you, not yet. But your tools, your machines, your workspace, it will show you the rules are more than lines on the floor. I nodded slowly, trying to steady my racing thoughts. I had learned obedience in a way that clawed at my nerves, but the idea that the entity could twist the tangible world, even when I wasn't near it, was almost unbearable. Frank handed me a wrench. "See that? You'll think it's just a wrench. You'll pick it up, use it, and trust it. Tonight, you'll find out it can be something else entirely. Never forget Rule 2. No outsider steps onto this property unless I say so. Everything else is fair game." I carried the wrench to the car we were working on, an old Chevy pickup with a stubborn engine. As I knelt beside it, the vibration beneath the floor began again, faint, deliberate, like the heartbeat of a predator pacing its cage. And then the wrench shifted in my hand. Just slightly at first, a micro-adjustment I barely noticed, but enough to make me flinch. I froze. The vibration beneath the shop intensified. The shadows pooled in corners, the metallic tang in the air thickened. Frank's voice cut through the tension. "Keep going. Don't react, don't resist, just follow the work." I focused on the engine, on the nuts and bolts, letting the motions I had learned take over. But every so often, the wrench would twitch or slide in my grip, almost as if it had a mind of its own. Every time I flinched, the floor vibrated more violently, and the shadows lengthened toward me, testing me, probing my fear. Then it whispered, softly at first, almost a caress, then louder, layering my own thoughts with voices I knew. "You can't fix it. You never belonged here. You're weak. You're alone." I closed my eyes, gritting my teeth. Rule 1, don't answer. Don't respond. Obedience. Survival. Frank moved beside me, adjusting a bolt with calm precision. "It feeds on hesitation," he said quietly. "Remember that. Never let it take your attention from the task. The moment you look at it, even in thought, it grows." The wrench slid again, sharper this time, almost tipping from my hands. I froze, trembling, and the whispering surged into a chaotic roar. But then I remembered the circle, the symbols, Frank's hands steady on the rod. I exhaled slowly, refocusing. "Pick up the wrench, tighten the bolt, don't look at the shadows. One deliberate motion at a time." The vibrations beneath the floor slowed, the whispers receded, though they lingered faintly in the corners of my mind. The wrench felt heavy, solid, obedient once more. Frank nodded once approvingly. "Good. You see, It can't control the circle, it can't break the rules, but it will try everything else. Tonight, it will get closer. It will try to touch the world beyond the floor. And it will always remember how you react. I swallowed hard, the sweat running down my temple. My hands ached from tension and labor, but I felt sharper, more awake than I had in years. I realized then that survival here was about precision, discipline, and respect for the rules, for the symbols, and for the ancient intelligence lurking beneath the floor. The shadow pulsed beneath the concrete, patient, deliberate. Outside the circle, the world was safe, for now. But I could feel its gaze stretching, testing the edges of the shop, probing for weakness. Frank rested a hand on my shoulder. Tonight, you'll learn why obedience alone isn't enough. Tonight, it will teach you fear in ways you can't imagine. But remember, the rules are the only shield. Forget them and you're finished. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the tests had only just begun. The shop breathed around us, alive in a way I could almost hear, almost feel, and the shadow beneath the floor waited, patient, intelligent, eternal. I tightened my grip on the wrench. I would not flinch. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a bruised gray, the kind of color that made everything look flat and drained, like the world had been painted over with old ash. Frank claimed storms didn't bother the thing beneath the garage. He said it was older than weather, older than whatever the sky thought it could threaten us with. But storms bothered me. At least today they did. Because today the shop was too quiet, the kind of quiet that felt curated, intentional. I was checking inventory, bolts, gaskets, filters, when the hum beneath the floor deepened. Not louder, not more violent, just deeper, like a lower octave being added to a song I hadn't noticed playing until it changed. It made my molars ache. Frank noticed. I saw the way he paused, socket wrench midair. "It's getting curious," he said quietly. "That's how it starts." How what starts? He looked toward the concrete floor, then toward the four corners of the rune circle around his work area. Boundary probing, I frowned. I thought it couldn't cross the circle. It can't. He kept staring down. But boundaries aren't just lines on the floor. Boundaries are faith. Before I could unpack that, the overhead lights flickered. Just once. A quick stutter. Then again, longer. Then once more. Long enough that the shadows stretched out like fingers across the walls. I froze, heart thudding. Frank exhaled sharply. "It's testing the breakers." How? How the hell can it? He raised a hand. "Don't ask. Don't theorize. Don't give it more shape than it has." The lights steadied. Then they died. Completely. Darkness swallowed the shop. Not dimness, not shadow. A total absence of light. The kind of darkness that felt aware. My breath hitched. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The air changed, growing thick and cold and damp, and like we had been lowered into the belly of a cave. Frank's voice arrived from somewhere to my left. Calm. Controlled. "My flashlight is in my pocket. I'm going to reach for it. Do not move." I didn't. Couldn't. Because something else moved first. Across the room, metal clinked. Small. Delicate. A ratchet? A stray bolt rolling? No. A tool tray sliding 3 inches across the floor. I heard every notch of its wheels scraping the concrete. Then something else scraped. Something heavy. Something slow. The darkness shifted. I swear it did, like a living thing adjusting its body weight. "Frank," I whispered. "It's not under the floor right now." "Correct." His voice was closer now. Too close. Right behind my shoulder. Except he'd been across the room 30 seconds ago. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. Something warm brushed my sleeve. "Frank?" "Don't turn around," the voice behind me said. But now I realized something. Something small. Something horrifying. The breath behind me wasn't Frank's. Frank breathed like a man who had smoked half his life. Rough, rasping, broken at the edges. This breath was wet, thick, slow, and impossibly deep. The presence behind me leaned closer. I could feel the size of it, towering, broad, occupying too much space in the small human world of the garage. Then it spoke, not in words, not even in language. It exhaled, and the air vibrated against my spine in a rhythm I recognized. The same rhythm that had throbbed beneath the concrete, the same breath I'd heard from below. The entity didn't need to break the floor. It didn't need to crawl up. It just needed the dark. Frank's real voice finally cut through the blackness, across the room where he truly stood. Stay absolutely still. He sounded farther than he should have been, like distance meant nothing in this darkness. The thing behind me inhaled again, a wet, dragging, cosmic breath. The entire shop hummed with it, metal vibrated on shelves, tools rattled lightly as if shivering. My muscles screamed to run, but the rule was clear: stillness, obedience. Don't answer, don't move. The breath behind me slowly retreated, inch by agonizing inch. Then, from across the darkness, a spark. Frank's lighter, a tiny flame snapped alive like salvation. The darkness recoiled, visibly, tangibly, like something hissing. For a split second, the flame reflected off something massive just at the edge of its glow. A surface, wet, pale, ridged like bone or cartilage, and impossibly large. Then it sank back into the black, withdrawing with a sound like shifting earth. Frank barked, "Move." He grabbed my arm, dragging me across the floor toward the rune circle. We stumbled into it as the overhead lights surged back to life all at once, harsh, blinding, buzzing with their own panic. The darkness evaporated instantly. Everything was normal again, too normal. Tools in place, metal shelves unmoved, no sign anything had entered. But the floor vibrated, slow, satisfied, almost pleased. Frank's face was drenched in sweat. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "It marked you," he said hoarsely. "Tonight wasn't a test, it was a greeting." My stomach dropped. "Why?" Frank inhaled, exhaled smoke, stared at the concrete like it was a grave. "Because now," he said, "it knows your shape." The first warning wasn't a sound, it was pressure. A slow, tidal weight pushing against the inside of my skull, like invisible fingers tracing along the backs of my eyes. I staggered, gripping the edge of the workbench as the garage rippled, the air vibrating like heat rising off asphalt. Frank reacted instantly. "Stay with me. Don't move toward it. Whatever you hear, whatever you think you see, do not cross the line." The line. The faint, chalky arc he'd drawn near my boots, the boundary between here and where it breathes. The floor bulged, not a crack, an actual bulge, like something beneath was pressing upward, curious, testing the strength of the concrete. Dust rained from the ceiling in a soft hiss. The pressure doubled, then tripled, until my ears popped painfully. Then came the voice, not spoken, not audible. Inside. A low, resonant drag of thought scraping against my own. "Come closer." My lungs seized. My vision swam. The wrench slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor, but I didn't bend to pick it up. I couldn't. Every muscle felt tethered, held taut by something vast and patient beneath the concrete. The bulge moved, slowly, left to right, tracking me. "You heard me." A pause. "Be kind and answer." Frank's hand snapped into my shoulder. Look at me. Right now." I forced my eyes onto his, the world stretching, bending like a warped lens around him. His expression was drawn tight. Fear, yes, but also fury. "At this stage," he said, voice low, "it doesn't ask, it lures. If you answer it, if you even think toward it, it will take your voice first. Then it'll take your memory. Then it will take the parts of you can't ever get back." The bulge slid again, positioning itself directly under my boots. So close I could feel warmth beneath the concrete. A whisper coiled through my mind. "You're already mine." And then a loud metallic clang from outside. A wrench hitting pavement, a can falling over. Whatever it was, the voice recoiled, just an inch, but enough for the pressure to thin like fog pulled back by wind. Frank seized the moment. He pressed the rod to the ground and drew a symbol in a swift, practiced motion. The rune flared, faint but solid, and the vibrations under my feet stopped. Not disappeared, not fled, just paused, like the creature was listening. "Out," Frank whispered. "Now." Slowly. Don't look at the floor. Don't step off the arc. Follow my boots. He backed toward the garage door, one deliberate step at a time. I matched him, step for step, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Behind us, the floor shivered. Another whisper slid up my spine. "You can't leave." The concrete at the center of the shop cracked in a single explosive line. Dust shot upward like breath. I stumbled, but Frank caught me by the jacket, hauling me upright before my boot could slip off the chalk mark. "Don't break the line," he snarled. We reached the threshold. Frank stepped out first, then yanked me through. The moment my foot crossed the garage door's lip, the pressure vanished. The whisper snapped away. The world brightened as if someone had turned up a cosmic dimmer. But behind us, the entire garage exhaled. Not wind, not heat. Something ancient and hungry pressing its face against the underside of the world. Frank slammed the metal door shut. Chapter 20, he said under his breath, is the part where you decide if you're going to run or stay and learn what the hell we're actually dealing with. He turned to me. And God help you, kid, because after what just happened, it knows your name now.